Welcome in. Rockets are 3-0 in the preseason. We just watched the Rockets beat the Pelicans in Birmingham, Alabama, 130 to 128, a game that probably wasn't as close as the final score would suggest, but Aaron Holiday puts in the game winner with 1.8 seconds left. And Rockets moved to 3-0 in the preseason. We've got a lot of things to discuss for this one because we saw some changes, and I want to introduce my co-host, Ben DuBose. Ben, good to have you here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's 3 down and 99 to go, right? Because you got one more preseason game, 82 in the regular season, and then 16 in the postseason.
Yeah, and this was, it's interesting. The game was a 1-point game at halftime, 60 to 59 after Kevin Durant hit that shot basically just before the final horn. And there's a lot to discuss in there. There were some good things, some bad things. But it starts with the starting lineup change for sure. And that's the Rockets went big. This looks more like a final dress rehearsal. Reed Shepherd is out. Reed started the first two preseason games. Steven Adams was in. What did you see in the switch to the big lineup?
Yeah, we were talking offline before we started recording, and I thought Steven, even though he had just 2 points, was the story of the game because he was plus 26 in 24 minutes, which is just ridiculous. And I went and looked back. This is only the second time, including preseason, regular season, and postseason, that Alperen, Sengun, and Steven Adams have started together. You know what the first time was?
What's
It was
that?
against the Oklahoma City Thunder last April when the Rockets won by 14 at home. And who do the Rockets open with next Tuesday? The Oklahoma City Thunder, who will most likely be starting Chet Holmgren and Isaiah Hartenstein. So it's a friendly matchup for the double big. It's a difficult matchup, so you might have to go outside the box. So I don't know if it's necessarily the long-term choice, but at least for opening night, the more you dig into the opponent, the matchup, it makes a lot of sense for the Rockets to potentially start with the double big. And I also wonder, after watching this game tonight, if Steven Adams might be, in a very convoluted way, the perfect replacement for Fred VanVleet. And obviously, they are wildly different as players in terms of, one's the smallest guy on the court and one is probably the biggest. But they are both very high IQ, very high floor. And when your other four guys are as high upside as certainly the big three of Kevin Durant, Amen Thompson, Alperen, Sengun, but Jabari Smith Jr., who had an excellent scoring night tonight, clearly has a ton of upside. That fifth spot, it may be less about the ceiling and more about the floor. And Fred and Steven do it in very different ways, but Steven with certainly the screen setting, the offensive rebounding, the presence near the rim, he's never going to be a zero. He's always going to make contributions, and the plus minus doesn't lie in that regard.
Yeah.
So that's why I wonder if maybe it's not an every game thing, and certainly at 32, you're going to need to load manage him throughout the season. But when the games are most meaningful, and especially if it's an advantage matchup like the Thunder, if maybe it's to your benefits to start Steven Adams, because whoever you start is going to at least have a floor of, I would say, 20 to 22 minutes per game. Because whoever you start, unless there's like insane foul trouble, they're going to play the first 6 minutes of the first and third quarters. That's 12 right there. And they're going to come back for at least one brief stint otherwise, 4 or 5 minutes, probably more than that. But at least I would say one more 4 or 5 minute stint per half. So you're looking at 20 to 22 at a minimum. And then if they're any good at all, obviously you can go from 20 to 22 to somewhere in the range of 28 to 30 very easily. As opposed to if you're coming off the bench, sure, you're going to play at least probably 12 minutes per game, but your role can be, it's much easier to slide it up or down. And so if you're looking at guys who maybe are higher ceiling, but also have lower floors, like a Reed Shepherd, like a Tari Eason, then sure, if they're hot, you can play the hot hand and reward them. But if they don't have it going on a given night, then you can maybe play them 12 to 15 minutes, and it's not that big of a deal. And so if your starting lineup already has a ton of upside between KD, Sengun, Amen, and now Jabari, it might make sense to play the higher floor guy. So, I did a lot of thinking tonight because the first couple of games, I sort of looked at Reed as the drop-in replacement because from an archetype standpoint, he's the closest to Fred, and that's something that people around the team have pointed out. But then in terms of how the whole unit functions, what I was thinking after tonight, maybe it makes sense just to go with the higher floor guy because you have enough upside between those other four. And so rather than, take the risk of Reed or Tari having a really bad night, with Steven, he's never going to be a negative. He's always going to be at least a neutral, usually a slightly positive. So maybe, I don't want to say it's an every game thing because a double big isn't without its challenges. But I guess my biggest takeaway after tonight, the double big with Steven Adams has a very high floor. I don't want to say a double big because I did think there were some rough minutes when it was Capella out there and not Steven Adams. Those didn't necessarily go that well. But if Steven Adams is part of the double big, the floor is really high, and maybe the floor is what we should be looking at in the absence of Fred VanVleet.
Yeah, Steven Adams to me is like, it's just like evidence that the Bucks score can lie, because this guy is so impactful, yet you look and he's 1 for 4 from the field, really not giving you much else. So you look at the rebounds, 6 offensive rebounds, just second chance opportunity after second chance opportunity. He's done this everywhere he's been. He is a major impact player in what he does for, box plus minus. And, it's been a luxury to have him. He's a starting level center just about anywhere. And I think that's what he is going to be doing now. Sengun's probably going to, I don't know about positions anymore, but Sengun's probably switching to the 4, so to speak, and whatever you want to call it in this double big lineup. And yeah, he's just tremendous. Like you said, the plus minus today showed. I think that, I don't know if it's not so much that Reed lost the opportunity. Maybe they just wanted to give him that experience. Maybe this was the plan all along for Ime, but I think this is where they're going. I think they're going to start the double big. That's just my guess.
Especially with the Thunder. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the Pistons are pretty physical too. So I would say that whole first week sort of sets up for the double big.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of going big today, we got to talk a little bit about Jabari Smith Jr. because this guy was so aggressive today. I mean, I barely recognized him. I've always believed in Jabari, obviously, but he was so aggressive with his shot. I don't know if this was the game plan necessarily because he did have Jordan Poole on him. I would assume, knowing Ime, that their plan was to basically attack, Jordan Poole. But there was several instances where he didn't hesitate in the slightest, was very comfortable getting into his spots, took a lot of catch and shoot opportunities, but also posted up, drove at times. He just looks like a different player. He looks more confident. I don't know so much if it's the physical nature, physical improvements as much as just he looks comfortable out there. And it showed today. He had 24 points in less than 20 minutes. And there was I want to play this one play. It really wasn't anything special, but you had pointed out before that Jabari and KD were bringing the ball up a lot. You could see him bringing it up here, and immediately they go right into the post up. With Poole on him, and he takes him. He doesn't score here, but he draws the foul and gets to the line. That's what we're seeing more of from Jabari. And when you are going with such a big lineup, Jabari's going to have players that sometimes are 6'5", 6'6", 6'7" guarding him. I can't believe I said 6'7". My daughter's going to flip out, but still, that's what's going to happen. You're going to have some mismatches with Jabari, and I think we saw that today.
Yeah, and Ime talked in training camp about one of the advantages to starting Jabari alongside that big 3 was that you could give it to him and he could take advantage of some of the weaker defenders who would inevitably be put on him at times. And I know in this configuration, it's not that Steven is a dynamic offensive player, but Steven is so big, you're going to have to cover him with a big, someone that can at least provide something of a presence near the rim to help box out. So yeah, when someone like a Jordan Poole is on Jabari, it makes all the sense to milk him. But yeah, I thought it was noteworthy the way they were initiating sets with Jabari and KD because, they would have a men bring the ball up the court in the backcourt just in case someone wanted to press them. But as soon as it got to half court, it felt like they were confident in KD and Jabari to make the right decisions. Obviously, they want to take advantage of what a men can do off the ball. And so, yeah, it felt like in the first and third quarters, there was a lot of initiation through either KD drawing something close to a double and then having a 4-on-3 type of situation, or just trusting Jabari to go out and put the ball on the floor if that's what the situation calls for. And that's why you focus on the overall skills development. At 22 years old, it's too soon to consider him just a 3-and-D type of player. No, there's more to his game, especially if he's going to be in this type of starting lineup where there's going to be so much gravity drawn by three players that he's playing alongside, then yeah, that's why you work on the handle and doing other things, be able to put the ball on the floor, to pass and create at times. And I thought you saw that tonight. It was really, really encouraging, not just that he made shots, but the overall totality of his game, the way he was able to make plays in so many different areas. Yeah, it sets up, to me, this season should be a clear leap forward for him. I don't know if it will be statistically, just because I don't know how many shots there are going to be. There's so many mouths to feed, especially when we get to the regular season. But in terms of efficiency, impact on winning, he is set up to thrive. And I thought tonight in the dress rehearsal, he did exactly that. Now, I do want to acknowledge the elephant in the room. I did think that, defensively, in the third quarter, it was very good, and that's where they largely put the game away. Now, I know they had to win it on the Aaron Holiday buzzer beater, or close to a buzzer beater, with like a second and a half left. But it was a weird game in that, they were elite offensively pretty much the entire time they were playing their big guns. They really, really struggled defensively in the second quarter. That's what allowed the Pelicans to briefly get a lead before that KD near buzzer beater at the half. Then it felt like sort of the vintage Warriors. The Rockets in the third quarter came out sort of annoyed and said, yeah, let's put this game away. And they pretty much did, even if the backups largely let that get away in the fourth quarter. With Jabari starting alongside Steven and Alpi, and this triple big, if you will. Sure, you can call it quadruple big, because it's basically Amen, Jabari, KD, Steven, and Sengun. The dribble penetration, stopping it, is going to be an issue. Like, they just don't have the lateral quickness. And I think, that's the one thing, Jabari is a very switchable defender, but it's not realistic to expect him to stop 6-foot guys that are uber quick and able to put the ball on the floor. He can deter them, and certainly his length in the zone can make some things happen, but he's not at the level of really Amen Thompson. And I guess, you can sneak a few minutes for Tari Eason in there, but he's not a perimeter stopper. And certainly Steven Adams and Alperen Sengun are nowhere close. And Kevin Durant at 37 is very limited as well. So offensively, this is going to flow really well. And it did. Defensively, it was a mixed bag at best. Mm-hmm. The silver lining you can point to in the third quarter, when they really wanted to put the game away, they were able to. And so that's a good sign. But I do think that what it shows you is that this configuration, if they do go double big for long stretches this year with Steven Adams, they are going to be very dependent on how much gas they have in the tank. And over 82 regular season games, it's easy for us to sit here and say, yeah, they should go all out every game. I don't think that's realistic, especially with as veteran laden as they are right now. So the silver lining, once you get to the playoffs, these guys will have more time between games. They'll go all out. And so if they crash the glass, if they're super active, like defending the passing lanes, they have the overall length, the physicality to overcome some of the issues with dribble penetration. But I do worry a little bit that during the regular season, last year it felt like 52-30. That group sort of squeezed out every last drop in terms of what Ime Udoka did with that team. This year's team may be a little bit different. There may be some games in the regular season that we're really frustrated because it just feels like, the opponent is getting way too easy of shots compared to what we would like them to and what on paper we think they should be able to get. But I think the flip side is that they have a gear once you get to bigger games, and especially the playoffs, once those double big lineups fully lock in with the zone and trying to, do everything they can to crash the glass, get every steal. They have a gear that last year's team didn't have. So that's the upside. The downside, what I do worry about a little bit, is that maybe in the regular season, you don't see them getting every margin advantage that they did a year ago.
Yeah, tonight, just real quick, as far as the Pelicans are concerned, I came into this year thinking this is a clear lottery team. I was stunned that they traded their draft pick for Queen in the draft, their draft pick for next year, which I think is going to set Atlanta up nicely. Then I saw Zion looked like he's in tremendous shape, but I watched him tonight. I don't think that team is, I think they're out of the playoffs. We'll see. They might, fight for the bubble or, for the play-in, but I just think that team's probably one of your bottom five. We'll see how it actually plays out. But yeah, it was a mixed bag. I mentioned this after the second game. I'm a little concerned about the defense. I clipped some of them, but I didn't bring them in here to the stream because I just didn't want to focus too much on that negativity, but there were some clear plays. There was one in the zone where a man went over to help Reed over to the left side, beyond the 3-point line for when they had two guys coming on a pick and roll, which kind of had left his zone spot, which left Sengun on an island, and Sengun didn't come over to recover. And Trey Murphy had a wide open three. There was not anybody within 10, 15 feet of him. He missed, but he was wide open. And Sengun knew that there was a miscommunication. I think it probably was on the men. You saw that timeout quickly when Alvarado in transition just went right past Reed and got the layup. And Ime was not happy and wanted to talk about it. I really don't want to judge the defense in its totality until we actually see Dorian Finney-Smith. But you've lost Fred. You lost Jalen. And I know people will say, well, you can't, put too much on Jalen or whatever, but I'm just going to give him a little bit of credit. He was a starter for this unit for a couple of years while they were good defensively.
He was laterally quick. I guess that's what I'm getting at, is that the way they're built, especially if they go with a double big, there's not a ton of lateral quickness defensively. And so you can try harder on the glass. You can try to be more active with steals and your overall length in the zone. But some of these deficiencies, short of the effort being superhuman, and that might happen on occasion, it'll certainly happen in the playoffs, but it's not necessarily going to be night and day different by the time you get to the regular season.
Yeah. And so we'll see. The defense is definitely a work in progress. I did, and Fred as well, you're missing, but I think Dylan, until we see DFS come out and play, is going to be missed. He was, in my opinion, the representation of their physical defense. You've still got Tari, you got Jabari, you got Amen. Those are all good defensive players, switchable and all of that. But Dylan is unique and very physical. So we'll see how this actually plays out. A couple things I want to talk about. One being KD, what we saw from KD. I thought, to me, this game clearly showed this guy's the closer of the team. I don't think that's anything breaking news, but I just thought that what we saw, especially at the very end of the half, when he did hit that shot, to me, this is a guy who I think they're going to, when they need a big bucket, just hand the ball to him and let him go to work. You see him working out of the high post, taking his guy here. He gets the N1. He had plenty of mid-range turnarounds in this game, one being right here, I believe. And then, like I said, also had that shot at the end of the half, was good in the third quarter. This is the second game that we see KD as a Rocket, and the road broadcast was basically drooling over him. The guy's truly special, even at 37 years old. If he's healthy, and that's, all year, I think the Rockets are going to be very strong. They have such a tremendous offensive weapon now as their primary source of offense. It's just a matter of how much do you lose defensively in the overall big picture until DFS gets back. But just offensively, this team looks much improved from last year.
Yeah, absolutely. I think what was most telling, KD actually missed all of his threes tonight, and he still had 15 points in 28 minutes on nearly 47% shooting. Like, let's be blunt. With Jalen Green last year, it was threes, layups, and not much else. He couldn't even get to the line very frequently, and you can criticize officials if you want, but the reality is he just didn't get there very often. Whereas with Kevin, even if the threes aren't falling, and this is a 50, 40, 90 guy for years in terms of his shooting splits, so I don't think you need to worry about him forgetting how to shoot. I think it's just an off night. But, I think the fact that he has other elements that he can turn to in his game, it's just night and day different than last year, where if Jalen didn't have it going on from three, I mean, you sort of have to shrug your shoulders in a lot of these matchups and say, where are you going to get the points from in the half court? And that's not meant to be a shot at Jalen. It's just a discussion of this year's team and why it's so different, because what you've basically done is put Kevin Durant into the Jalen Green role in terms of being your tip of the spear perimeter scorer. Now, how much is the defense going to drop off? Yeah, that's a fair question. We can wonder about that. And, I don't want to go too far down that road until the games get real and we see what they look like at closer to peak effort. But offensively, yeah, they were a middle of the pack offense last year, even with Jalen Green's flaws. Tonight was a reminder that even if KD isn't making the threes, he's still so much better in so many areas that he just makes the offense that much better overall. And certainly it's not all him. Jabari had a big game. We should talk about Tari briefly as well, who had 20 points on 9 of 15 shooting. But I think a lot of that comes down to KD. I mean, KD draws so much attention that your ancillary pieces like Jabari and like Tari are able to get much more advantage situations when they're in the game.
Yeah, and I was going to mention Tari as well. Tari talks about being underrated, and he's right, because we didn't even, my fault, didn't even mention him until now. But yes, 20 points off the bench in 21 minutes, was 9 of 11 inside the arc, 0 of 4 from beyond the arc, but hit 9 of 11 inside, and had a very, very strong game. Him and Jabari really kind of keyed and led the offense. Men ended up with 21 as well. Got to give a shout out to Sengun. It wasn't his best game, but still 8 points, 12 boards, 7 assists. But it leads me to the problem with the Rockets offense that is showing itself, and that's the turnovers. They had, 11 of them in the first half. Sengun finished with 6 turnovers today. Reed with 4. And Reed, he played the final 2 minutes of the first quarter, had 2 of the worst turnovers, that the kind that, coach will pull his hair out watching. And he had 4, and I believe Amen had 3. So that was 13 of those of the team's turnovers from the 3 guys that you are hoping to kind of take over from Fred as far as your lead ball handler. Like you said, you pointed out, KD and Jabari were bringing the ball up a lot tonight, but those are the 3 that you expect to be kind of creators or, the assist guys, and they can't have the high turnovers. So you're more efficient offensively, but you are turning it over more.
Yeah, and I guess if you want to find a silver lining, I didn't think that a lot of the turnovers were because they couldn't do something. It's not like guys were just getting ripped in the backcourt. It was more that the Pelicans had them scouted. Like, I thought they were overplaying a lot early in the shot clock, and the Rockets' reads were a little vanilla. And so it looked to me like the Pelicans were anticipating. And I think the fact that Sengun had 6 turnovers, I don't want to say it was a bad game for him, because certainly he always, brings a lot of gravity, and so that helps his teammates. But he wasn't nearly as efficient when we talk about the playmaking and the passing as he was in his first couple of games. The fact that it's not just Amen and Reed, but it's Sengun as well, leads me to believe that it's not necessarily a physical deficiency. It's more that, the Pelicans had them well scouted. They had a good idea of what they wanted to do. And now it's on Ime Udoka and the Rockets as a staff, not just any player individually, to develop some counters. And if they're going to overplay on these, dribble handoffs up high, then okay, get some more off-ball movement going towards the bucket to sort of make them pay if they're going to play that aggressively. So I guess that's the one positive spin I would try to put on it, is that the turnovers, they're terrible. And without Fred, that's, absolutely one of the big variables to watch for going into this year. But I do think it's something that they theoretically can adjust to. It's not like they were just getting ripped going up the court. It was more they got in the sets, and the Pelicans just sort of outsmarted them, outscouted them, whatever you want to call it, and just anticipated the action before the Rockets ran it.
Yeah, there's one thing I want to talk about before we finish tonight, and that's basically the little skirmish we saw. I believe was it second quarter, maybe it was third. I'm blanking out here on when
second
that was.
Quarter, end
second
of it.
Quarter.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me be clear on this, and I've got the clip. I'll play it, but Alvarado was the instigator of this. Clearly was getting up in a man, and Jose Alvarado has done this his whole career.
He's the new age Pat Beverly. Yeah,
absolutely. But the thing about this is, Amen, he's young and he's amazing, but some of his reactions have gotten him in trouble in the past, and I think we may have gotten, we may be good here. Because when I first saw it, I thought he clearly threw a punch.
Yeah, I worried that too, the wide shot. Yeah.
Yeah, and looking at it here, you can see it here a little bit in slow motion. He kind of, he kind of throws his hand. I mean, you could consider certainly not a closed fist punch, and it's kind of a push / shove / punch. I don't know what you want to call it. Didn't connect. I think we may get lucky here, but my initial reaction was, here comes a 1-game suspension for the OKC game, first game of the year.
Mine too.
It was only called a flagrant 1, and he stayed in the game. Like I said, finished with 21 points, overall 5 boards, 3 assists. What's your overall feeling here? I think I probably won't endear myself to Rockets fans to say I really wish you would chill a little bit. But I mean, I'm not out there. I'm not out there banging with these guys. I know how tough that is. But I'm just saying, I wish his reaction on that. I wish it just toned down just a touch, because he could get in trouble pretty easily.
Yeah, he could. I worried that it was a punch initially until I saw the replays. And look, I thought what Alvarado did was a dirty play. So I'm not going to say that Amen wasn't justified in doing what he did. However, I think part of the responsibility of being a star in the NBA is recognizing that you are more important than most players. And so if Amen had responded the way I'm sure he wanted to on some level, yeah, my guess is that the officials probably would have tossed both of them. Maybe they both get suspensions, because if the league office looks at it, and I don't want to say it's impossible league office looks at it, but I think they're probably out of the woods simply because they stopped the game to review this for several minutes. And so the only way that you could discipline after the fact is if the league office determines that the refs screwed up. Like if you discipline after the fact, then you're saying the flagrant one was wrong and that this should have been. So I doubt they want to say on the record that their officials, after an extended review, botched this. So I think, this particular incident is probably in the rearview mirror. But if it had gotten worse, and certainly it has in the past, look at the Tyler Hero situation a year ago.
Yeah.
The bottom line is, if both of those players get tossed, Amen Thompson is way more important to the Rockets than Jose Alvarado is to the Pelicans. And Jose Alvarado knows that. And that's true of most people that go against Amen Thompson. You can, I saw someone in the comments saying that you can bait him. I mean, that sounds a little strong, but I think that's a little bit of what Jose Alvarado was doing. He was sort of trolling a little bit. And we see that from time to time with various players in the NBA. And the bottom line is, some of these more troll type players. I mean, we saw this with Pat Beverly back in the day. I think one of the reasons Pat Beverly played that way, on some level, he knew, hey, if both of us get tossed, it's going to be a net benefit to our team, because I'm really not that important in the grand scheme. So, yeah. And so that's the big thing for me with the men. It's like, I don't think he's doing anything wrong per se, because, I mean, it was a dirty play by Jose Alvarado. Like, I can't blame a men for responding. Like, he was not the instigator here, not even close.
I totally agree.
However, if you're a star in the NBA and Amen is pretty close, like one of the reasons for optimism with this year's team is, you don't just have 2 all-stars and KD and Alperen and Sengun. Internally, the Rockets feel like they have 3 all-star caliber players. Well, if you are an all-star caliber player in the NBA, it's going to be a net loss to your team if you get tossed along with somebody on the other side, because most players are not all-stars that you're going up against. So, that's where I understand where it comes from. And in a lot of these situations, I don't think Amen is a hothead, so to speak. I think he plays a physical brand of ball. And in situations where it's gone, maybe over the line a little bit, I think he has not been the instigator in most of them. However, I do think that, and hopefully this happens with time and maturity, but as it sets in on him that he's one of the best 20, 30, 40 players in the world, hey, him getting tossed is a bigger deal for the Rockets than whoever he's going up against is getting tossed for the opponent. So, it may not be fair, but that's just the responsibility that comes from being a top shelf player in the NBA, and hopefully he adjusts to that.
Yeah, and I think he will. I'm hoping. I mean, it's a double-edged sword, because the dude is so competitive. He's so unique. He's just special. You talk to people with the Rockets behind the scenes, they'll just rave about Amen Thompson, how good he is, especially defensively, and just how good of an athlete he is. He's so competitive, the way what he wants to be, in the NBA. That drive is probably also what sparks some of this. He just doesn't put up with crap and responds. But we've seen it a few times. Tyler Hero, we saw it. Remember a year and a half ago, I think against Dallas at the end of the year, in his rookie season. I can't remember who it was. Maxi Kleber, maybe he tossed. I can't remember. But we're going to get into playoff situations that are going to be way more competitive than this preseason game. So I just hope he, kind of learns to tone that down just a touch, so we don't lose him for other games. And
to respond to someone in the comments, I'm reading, how would you feel if someone bear hugged you and refused to let go while pulling you to the ground? It's instinct to push him off. Yes, 100% agree. However, he was close to going over the line tonight. He didn't do it, but for a split second, it looked like he did. So I guess it's one of those things,
dodged a bullet. Yes.
Yeah, dodged a bullet, and maybe he did know all along what he was doing, and if he did, tip your hat to him. But it was close to the retaliation being excessive. And so I think it's one of those situations where behind the scenes, the Rockets will say, hey, let's learn from this. I understand the reaction, but let's make sure we don't go any further than that. Because if you do, the consequences, just based on how good Amen is, would be much more for the Rockets than they are for the opponent.
Yeah. We'll close with this. Have you heard whether they're playing on Thursday, the starters? So Rockets closed the preseason Thursday against the Hawks. They played them earlier. It's the best team that they played in the preseason, I think, by far. Yeah. And so then this will be the final game before the regular season.
Last week, they said they were. Last week, Ime said that they would treat these last two games as a dress rehearsal. And we saw some changes tonight. The biggest one off the bench, it was tightened to a 9-man rotation, and it was Josh Okogie, more of a veteran, not J.D. Davison. Definitely head to the J.D. Davison fan club tonight. I got to own that. But
right.
I do wonder about Thursday, with it being just 5 days until the regular season and a very physical opener in Oklahoma City and a very good opponent in the Hawks, if they might pull back a little bit.
Yeah,
I don't know. Maybe they sort of split the difference and play the starters for a half, and then you see a little bit more of the J.D. Davison lineups in the second half. That's what I wonder. I haven't heard that. The plan before tonight was for them to take these last two as a dress rehearsal. But look, they're 3-0. They've looked really good the last two games, at least overall. I mean, I know the second quarter was sort of hit or miss tonight. I'm not even going to count the fourth quarter because that was all, second, third teamers. Yeah. I think you throw that out. We're predominantly focused on the first three quarters. The Utah game tonight, by and large, clear wins. I would not be surprised. I have not heard this, but I would not be surprised if Ime Udoka said, we'll play the starters, but maybe we cut them off at about the midway point because they've proven all that can be proven in the regular season or in the preseason. And you've got a really tough regular season opener next Tuesday in Oklahoma City.
Yep, absolutely. We'll close there. Ben, man, appreciate you doing this. Rockets have one more game. We'll see. We'll do it Thursday again. We'll do a post game after they take on the Hawks, and then it's on to the regular season. Thanks to everybody. Appreciate all you listening and supporting. If you want to know when we go live, just subscribe to the channel and you'll get notifications. Thanks, guys.